All right, so back in the Mesillat Yesharim, Path of the Just, chapter 16, this is the virtue of purity, Taharah. Purity entails corrective measures aimed at the requirement of one's heart and thoughts. This idiom was used by David, who said in Tehillim, that Psalms 51:12, "Create for me, O God, a pure heart." The purpose of this virtue is that a person should prevent the evil inclination from influencing his actions. All of his actions should be permeated with knowledge and fear of the eternal, and should be free of sin and lustful desire. This is relevant even to an action that involves one's physical and material needs. For even though one conducts himself with abstinence, taking from the world no more than what is essential, he must still purify his heart and thought, so that the little that he does should have nothing to do with pleasure and desire. Rather, the intent of his action should be directed toward the good that will emerge from this deed, and it should be bound in knowledge in the service of the eternal. And this is like a much higher level. So as we go through this book, this is, and it could be even more foreign to how we feel or even perceive that spiritual greatness is. So the further we get to the back, the more it's going to be foreign to us. So as they said about Rabbi Eliezer in Nedarim 20b, he would expose a hand breath and conceal 2 hand breaths, and it seems as though he was being compelled by a demon. He received no pleasure whatsoever from this, and he performed this deed only because of the mitzvah involved and because it was an act of divine service. And in this vein, Solomon said in Mishlei, that's Proverbs 3:6, "In all of your ways know him, and he will align your paths." At the same time, one should be aware that just as it is possible for purity of thought to influence corporal actions that naturally attract the evil inclination, distancing them from it and thereby preventing them from being possessed by it, it is also possible for purity of thought to influence deeds that are oriented toward the Creator, and may his name be blessed, so that they should not veer from him and be possessed by the evil inclination. This will prevent what is often referred to by sages of rabbis of blessed memory as the performance of a mitzvah, not for its own sake, but for all ulterior motives. However, it is clear from the words of the sages of blessed memory that there are various categories that relate to the performance of a mitzvah for ulterior motives. The worst of them is the person who only serves the eternal in order to deceive people and for the sake of honor or monetary gain. Referring to such an individual as has been stated in Yerushalmi Berachot 1:5, he would have been better off had he been strangled by his placenta. And the prophet was referring to such a person when he said in Yeshayahu 64:5, so Isaiah 64:5, "We have all become as one who is impure, and all our righteousness is like a tattered garment." Another type of ulterior motive involves a person who serves the eternal for the sake of the reward. Referring to such a person, and it has been said in Pesachim 50b, one should always engage in Torah and mitzvot, even for ulterior motives. Through ulterior motives, one will be led to engage in them for their own sake. Nevertheless, he who has not yet attained purity of motivation by means of these ulterior motives is far from having achieved perfection. So on the other hand, what requires even more serious evaluation and concentrated application is the mingling of ulterior motives with one's pure intentions. This means that sometimes a person will truly perform a mitzvah with the right intentions, because our Father in heaven decreed it, yet he does not refrain from adding some other motive, such as his desire to be praised or to be rewarded. And sometimes a person may have no intention of courting praise. Nevertheless, the joy that he experiences by being praised will motivate him to be more conscientious. This is what happened to the daughter of Rabbi Hanina ben Tardion in Avodah Zarah 18a, who had a graceful way of walking. When she overheard people saying, "How nice are the strides of this young lady," she immediately took even greater care. This additional care was the result of the praise she received, and although an offense of this nature is relatively insignificant, nonetheless, a deed that is tainted in this manner cannot be considered completely pure. Just as the meal offering of the Omer cannot be sacrificed on the altar of the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, unless it had been sifted by passing through 13 sieves, Menachot 76b. For only in this manner can it be guaranteed to be without any dross. Likewise, one may not submit a deed to the highest altar, the will of the eternal, with the intention that it become a part of the perfect and supreme divine service, if it is anything other than the choicest of deeds, completely purified from all dross. I am not saying that anything less than this will be totally rejected, for the Holy One, blessed be He, does not withhold the reward due to any creature, and He gives payment for one's deeds according to their worth. What I am referring to is the faultless divine service that anyone who truly loves the eternal should aspire to. This term should be used only for that service, which is completely pure and directed only to the eternal and not to anything else. Any action that falls short of the standard will, to that degree, detract from the quality of its divine service. This is what David HaMelech, may peace be upon him, said in Tehillim, that's Psalms 73:25. Whom do I desire in the heavens? And besides you, I wish for nothing else on the earth. Similarly, he stated in Psalm 119:140, your word, Imratcha, is very pure, and your servant loves it. True service to the eternal requires much more purification than do gold and silver. This is what has been said about the Torah. I think this is Psalms 12:7. The words Imrot of the eternal are pure words. Amarot, Taharot, as silver purified in a crucible upon the earth, refined sevenfold. He who serves the eternal truly will find satisfaction in minimal fulfillment. He who serves the eternal truly will not find satisfaction in minimal fulfillment, nor will he be willing to accept silver mixed with dross and tin, that is, worship that is tainted by impure motives. The only thing that he will find acceptable will be worship that is properly cleansed and purified. At this point, he will be classified as one who performs the mitzvah as it was originally meant to be done. And about whom our sages of blessed memory have said in Shabbat 63a, whoever performs a mitzvah as it was originally meant to be done will never receive evil tidings. Similarly, they of blessed memory declared in Nedarim 62a, do things for the sake of he who has created them, and speak about them for the sake of heaven. This is the chosen way of those who serve the eternal with a whole heart. For he who does not cleave to the eternal with absolute love in adoption of this type of service will become arduous and hard to bear. For he will say, what can sustain this? We are ordinary mortals, born of women. We cannot possibly attain such refinement and purification. But the hearts of those who love the eternal and aspire to serve him rejoice in expressing the commitment of their love for him and in strengthening themselves through the refinement and purification of his service. This is what David HaMelech himself concluded in the verse which is quoted above in Tehillim 119:140, and your servant loves it. In reality, this is the acid test through which those who serve the eternal are graded and distinguished. He who has a greater understanding as to how to purify his heart will find himself closer to the eternal and more beloved by him. It was this standard of purity that characterized the first ones in the land, who prevailed and triumphed in this manner. Our forefathers and the shepherds, the leaders of the nation of Israel, who purified their hearts before the eternal. David was referring to this when he cautioned his son Shlomo in Divrei Hayamim 1, Chronicles, the first book of Chronicles 28:9, for the eternal searches all hearts and understands all the workings of our thoughts. Similarly, our sages of blessed memory have said in Sanhedrin 106b, the merciful one desires the heart of man, for the master, blessed be he, is not satisfied with deeds alone in the performance of mitzvot. Rather, what is most important to him is that the heart be pure, so that it may direct itself to the true service of the eternal. The heart is the king that rules over the rest of the body, and if it does not rouse itself to serve the blessed one, the service of the other limbs is meaningless. For they will go where the spirit of the heart takes them. Scripture states explicitly in Mishlei, that's Proverbs 23:26, my son, give your heart to me. Chapter 17, Acquiring purity. Acquiring this virtue is easy for one who has, through effort, already acquired the virtues taught until now. When one contemplates and examines the base nature of the pleasures of the world and their benefits, as I have written previously, he will find them repulsive, and he will regard them only as the ills and defects of the corporeal, obscure, and crude side of man's nature. And when it becomes absolutely clear to him that they are really defects and ills, it will no doubt be easier for him to disassociate himself from them and to remove them from his heart. Therefore, the more he is able to develop a deep and enduring awareness of the base nature of corporality and its pleasures, the easier it will be for him to purify his thoughts and his heart and totally prevent them from drawing him toward the evil inclination. In his actions in relation to the corporeal, he should always behave like one who is being coerced by his natural instincts. However, in the same manner that he divided purity of thought into two separate categories, the one in reference to physical deeds and the other in reference to deeds devoted to the service of the eternal, likewise the intellectual effort needed to acquire it falls into two categories. Thus, in order to purify one's thought in the domain of corporal actions, one must continually scrutinize the base nature of the physical world and its pleasures, as I've written. But to purify one's thought in the type of deeds devoted to the service of the eternal, one must expand his awareness of the delusory nature of honor and the deceptions that are connected with it, and he must train himself to flee from honor. Consequently, when he is occupied with serving the eternal, he will be cleansed of the influence that comes from the administration and praise of his fellows, and his thought will be directed solely to our Master, whom we extol, and who is the source of all our goodness and perfection. There is none other. Similarly, it states in Devarim, that's Deuteronomy 10:21, he is your praise, and he is your God. Among those deeds that direct one toward the acquisition of this virtue is the manner in which one prepares himself regarding the divine service and the mitzvot. This means that one should not approach the fulfillment of a mitzvah impulsively when his presence of mind is deficient and he cannot therefore think clearly about what he is doing. Rather, he should arouse himself and patiently prepare his heart until he enters the stage of contemplation. Then he should contemplate what he is planning to do and before whom he is planning to do it. For once he begins this process of analyzing it, it will be easy to discard any extraneous motives and to internalize the truly desirable motivation. Let us recall that Hasidim Harishonim, so those who practice piety in the early generations, so basically means the first pious ones, used to devote 1 hour before their prayers, Berachot 30b, to directing their hearts to the divine presence. And actually, this is reflected in the length of the prayers that we have today. Like, if you pray Shacharit, you start out with various passages of study. The Akedah, the binding of Isaac, various other passages like the Korbanot and the Ketoret, and maybe a few songs, different things like that. It's designed to progressively move you into an attitude where you can finally get to the Shemona Ezra. Excuse me. And Pesuki de Zimra is more like it's like a minor Hallel almost. It's supposed to be celebratory, and today, I don't think most shuls sing it, and it really should be something that's sung and really celebrated. I mean, that really drives your heart. And if someone goes in that progression, going through all those and then learning about the offerings and Rebbe Yishmael and Abaye and the order of the temple service and all that kind of stuff, and then you pass into Pesuki de Zimra and then the Shema and any blessings that are associated with any of that stuff. By the time you get to Shemona Ezra, I guess if you're paying attention, internally, and you're actually, driving yourself in that direction, that, by the time you get to Shemona Ezra, the core of what we call tefillah, then you will be more in the mood. So honestly, if you did spend all that time to do all that study and you didn't skip it, and you go through Pesuki de Zimra and you sing it, and you really get engrossed in it, you could easily spend an hour before you get to the real tefillah, Shemona Ezra. So they surely did not spend that hour idly. It says, rather they aroused and prepared their hearts for the forthcoming prayer, divesting themselves of any foreign thoughts and fulfilling their spirits with the requisite fear and love of the eternal. And it says in Job 11:13, if you have prepared your heart, you may then spread your hands toward him. And the factors that undermine this virtue are the result of insufficient examination of the aforementioned matters, that is, the lack of awareness regarding the base nature of pleasure, the pursuit of honor, and the insufficient preparation for the service of the eternal. And the first two factors sway a person's thinking, luring him toward other motives, like an adulteress who consorts unfaithfully with other men. These externally oriented motives are called the adultery of the heart, as it is written, Bamidbar 15:39, and you must not be searching, following your heart and your eyes, after which you tend to stray. And that's referring to the tzitzit. It says to look upon the tzitzit. That's the explanation for the tzitzit on the four corners of your garment, so that you will see it, and you won't follow after your heart and after your eyes of which you stray. So for the tendency of the heart is to stray from the ideal perspective that it was meant to cleave to, embracing instead vanities and false appearances. The latter factor, preparing oneself insufficiently, prevents the removal of one's heart of that innate thoughtfulness that derives from the material world. This thoughtlessness befouls the divine service with its stench. We'll now explain the virtue of piety. So we're finished with purity. So next so many chapters are going to deal with piety.